Thank you. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, commissioners. And it is always good to see the FTC here. I spent 2 wonderful years at the FTC. There are a lot of terrific men and women who work there at the commission. As you know, I have deep, deep concerns, in particular about big tech. I think big tech today represents the greatest accumulation of power, market power and monopoly power over information that the world has ever seen. And the players in big tech are getting more and more brazen. They behave as if they are completely unaccountable, and at times they behave more like nation states than private companies. I think the commission has not done nearly enough to rein in the abuse of power of big tech. When it comes to content moderation, they're absolutely a black box. They refuse to answer questions. In the Senate, we have promulgated questions to big tech over and over again about their content moderation decisions. Who are they blocking? Specifically, what are the numbers? Under what circumstances? What are the remedies? What is the decision making? And big tech's standard answer to all of that is essentially jump in a lake, that they don't have to answer. We saw before the prior election, big tech take an even greater step and block the New York Post, shut down the nation's 4th largest print newspaper because big tech disagreed with a story that they had put out. That market power with zero transparency and zero accountability, I think, is dangerous. It is dangerous for free speech. It is dangerous for free and fair elections. In your collective judgment, what can and what should the commission do to rein in the abuse of power from big tech?
Senator Cruz, there's no question that these firms wield enormous power over our lives, over our economy, and over our democracy. I was happy that the FTC voted to issue a complaint against Facebook and its anti-competitive practices, but it's clear there was a lot of missed opportunities to rein it in before, and local journalists, media have been destroyed by many of these practices. We have to do more. Congress has to do more when it comes to abuses of Section 230. And we also have to get to the bottom of the black box algorithms that they have. The FTC has issued some orders to understand some of those content curation practices, how those algorithms make decisions, and ultimately we need to hold them accountable for when they violate the law.
Senator Cruz, this is Christine Wilson, if I can have just a moment to respond as well. I agree with you that there are significant concerns about content moderation, content curation. As Commissioner Chopra indicated, Commissioner now Acting Chair Slaughter and Commissioner Chopra and I worked together to design the 6B study that Commissioner Chopra referenced, and I think that is perhaps the most important task that the FTC is undertaking right now. As to the question of whether the FTC currently has authority to address these issues, can content suppression be an unfair practice under our consumer protection and competition mandates? I believe that if firms act in ways that are contrary to their material representations or terms of service, it could be an unfair or deceptive act. I don't want the FTC to be the speech police. We're not equipped to judge political speech, but it is within our authority to determine whether companies are living up to their promises to consumers. As for questions of unfair competition, if firms agree to censor a specific and disfavored perspective, it could raise a question of whether there was an illegal agreement under Section 1 of the Sherman Act. So, for example, if different social media companies take down similar content in the same 24-hour period, that could raise a question about whether companies reached a potentially illegal agreement behind the scenes to silence certain perspectives. Obviously, parallel conduct is necessary but not sufficient to prove an antitrust violation, but I would be interested in taking a look at some of these simultaneous takedowns to determine whether there is an underlying agreement that was driving those actions.
Senator, I just wanted to add that I agree with you that we need to be really concerned about the exercise of market power by these extremely large companies. I think I was pleased to support the complaint we had against Facebook. I shared the concerns Commissioner Chopra articulated earlier about our resolutions of the order enforcement case against Facebook earlier and the YouTube case against Google, because I was concerned that it would not adequately incentivize companies to start following the law. Neither of them would adequately incentivize companies to start following the law. And going back to the topic of this hearing, I think we need to think about the role platforms have to play in the dissemination of COVID scams, for example. This is another area, Commissioner Chopra pointed to Section 230. I think this is an area where we see the scams popping up again and again and again on these platforms, and 230 can inhibit our ability to hold platforms accountable for being the marketplace of bad action instead of good ideas.
Well, and let me encourage you, I think there's particular value the Commission can add in terms of transparency, in terms of addressing the black box. So, for example, big tech claims there's not political bias. Well, they happen to have a monopoly on all the information and data you would look to assess whether there's political bias. And so I've asked repeatedly in the 2020 election cycle, how many Republican candidates for office did you block post from? How many Democratic candidates? There's an answer. It's a concrete number. They have it. They refuse to give it. Simply making that information public for multiple cycles, what they're doing, I think would be incredibly beneficial, reining in the abuse of power. And I think the Commission has ample authority to require those disclosures right now.
Well, I just want to point out, Senator, I, as Commissioners Wilson and Chopra indicated, very much supported and think the 6B study that we are doing on social media platforms is extremely important. I would like it to result in us adding some transparency to the marketplaces, but the 6B statute specifically prohibits us from disclosing certain information that we receive as a part of those studies, where it's tied to particular companies, so we can comment on market trends. But I want to be mindful of the limitations of our statutory authority, which we obviously can't go over, and set expectations reasonably there.
Well, but thank you. We definitely, I mentioned earlier, we are going